The long-running public campaign to give terminally ill people the right to die is a legal and moral challenge that governments have been wrestling with for more than a decade. The Federal Parliament quashed a 1995 Northern Territory law that made euthanasia legal, but it doesn't have the same power to overrule the states. And now moves in 2 states are closer to succeeding than ever before. That has euthanasia advocates hoping there'll be a domino effect that will circumvent the opposition in Canberra and get all the states on board. Mike Sexton has this report.
Every day, doctors and nurses save lives. But at the edge of the best medical science is the reality that sometimes nothing more can be done. And there lies some ethically challenging questions.
When we're encountering people at the end of their lives who can't be cured, who are suffering, and whose suffering is very difficult to control, sometimes the only way to achieve relief of that suffering is with those treatments that can hasten death.
Roger Hunt's been a palliative care specialist for 25 years and knows there's a fine line between helping a patient and breaking the law.
If we are hastening the dying process as a way to relieve suffering, then that does leave us open in terms of prosecution under the criminal law. So we're very careful in that situation.
But this legal dilemma facing doctors could be relieved in at least one state.
It was obvious to me that doctors, both in the palliative care and general practitioners, were saying that they needed to have a defence for practice that they already take place.
So I think, it means that, things are more out in the open.
South Australian Labor backbencher Stephanie Key has introduced a bill that provides legal protection for doctors whose work hastens a patient's death. And in doing so, she's reignited the debate over voluntary euthanasia.
Surveys have shown that doctors are acceding to patients' requests for assistance to die in face of unrelievable suffering, and doctors should be able to follow their duty of care. They should have that legal protection in following their duty of care to relieve suffering.
I think that this current bill that we're looking at in South Australia is probably one of the most dangerous I've ever seen.
Paul Russell heads an online network called Hope that bluntly opposes any moves to legalise euthanasia. He argues that while the proposed legislation offers protection to doctors, there's nothing for patients.
It abandons, in my opinion, the aged, the vulnerable, the disabled and the voiceless to the whims of a doctor who may well be bent on seeing them die.
While South Australia is looking to decriminalise, Tasmania is attempting a step further to legalise voluntary euthanasia.
I have watched polling over the years which has consistently shown the vast majority of people in the community want some form of dying with dignity legislation.
The Tasmanian and South Australian proposals are the latest skirmish in a nationwide battle over euthanasia. Since 1995, when the Northern Territory briefly legalised the practice, only to be overruled by the Commonwealth, there have been more than a dozen attempts in various states and territories, all of which have failed.
My concern from that experience is the extent to which the debate does become adversarial and politicised rather than being a genuine debate with that common ground and that common good.
NATASHA CICA advised the Senate on the 1995 legislation that overturned the Northern Territory rules. She believes if Tasmania and South Australia succeed, then others will follow.
In a real political sense, when one jurisdiction makes a major legislative change, and this would undoubtedly be a major legislative change, it does licence or empower other jurisdictions to consider similar legislation.
There are changes afoot, and I doubt whether the federal government is going to do anything about it. Also, we expect to see the Bob Brown bill in federal parliament, which will allow territories once again to make such laws.
Prominent pro-euthanasia activist Philip NITSCHKE's been in Adelaide and Hobart scouting for possible sites to set up clinics. He believes even if laws are changed, doctors and patients will need specialist advice and counselling.
The idea that a GP can at a certain point suddenly, when the patient asks, say, yes, sure, I'll help you die, and write out a prescription for lethal barbiturates is naive. There's much more to it than that, and as I said, we learnt these lessons in the north, and we shouldn't repeat the same mistakes down here.
Killing people is not something that doctors are trained to do. And once we include that into their work structure, if you like, I think it definitely changes things. It changes the way they will view patient care, and it changes the way patients will view medical professionals.
The South Australian bill will continue its journey through the Parliament this month, with the Tasmanian legislation likely later in the year. The developments will be watched keenly by both sides of an emotional debate that shows no sign of going away.
I do think it would be to everyone's benefit if we talked more openly about death and we're all more aware of what actually happens at the end of life.
Mike Sexton reporting.